Perfect. Thanks, Kate. And I just turned on the recording, so we will get started. And one other just housekeeping note while we're presenting, if you do have any general questions that you'd like for us to respond to throughout the presentation, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we will take a look at those once we get through the formal presentation. At the end, if you do have other questions that you didn't want to put in the chat, but you want to unmute yourselves and ask, we'll have time for that at the end as well. All right. So just to get things started, we wanted to address the big question that we've all been dealing with for the last couple of years, but thinking about what does summer 2022 look like with COVID-19. So the good news is that all of your programs have been approved by UNC leadership to continue for summer 2022. And we are continuing to monitor all of our programs and locations just to make sure that, locations are still safe. We're looking at COVID vaccination rates in countries, hospitalization rates, data from the State Department, the CDC, just constantly monitoring to make sure that nothing is changing significantly and that we can still continue with your programs in a way where you will be healthy and safe and be supported while in your location. We continue to work with our partners on the ground. So, program staff letting us know things that are happening, just to make sure that, we're sending you to places where we feel confident over the summer. And we do have some FAQs up on our website just about COVID-19 and if any changes are to occur. At this point, we don't anticipate any changes, but if we've learned anything in the last 2 years, there are always things that can happen. But as of now, all programs are approved moving forward, and we're keeping an eye on locations and the status of things. So just a quick overview of our agenda today. These are the different aspects we're going to cover. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a general session, so we are going to be speaking in generalities for some of this, but all of this information is specific to UNC, you as a UNC student, UNC policies, procedures, that kind of thing. So we'll kind of do a section on before you go, insurance, money, what to pack, things along those lines. And then things to think about while you're abroad, academics, health and safety, living, culture, and then we'll share some additional resources for you at the end. And then of course, questions like I mentioned. So a couple of admin basics just to start. So both of these are in process now, registration and billing at UNC. So all of you would have seen a program budget sheet when you applied to your program, or you might have helped build a program budget sheet if you're going on one of our partner provider programs through IES, API, SFS, SIT, any of those. So the budget sheet tells you what costs are billed to your student account at UNC and what costs might be billed to you by the program provider, or costs that you would just pay directly to a housing provider for your travel, things like that. All of the billing and the registration occurs on the summer 1 timeline at UNC, regardless of your program. So that is something that you might find a little odd if your program's happening later in the summer. You might have expected it to be considered a summer 2 program. All study abroad is actually considered summer 1. So you'll see your study abroad registration in summer 1. For some of you, that might mean that you're not able to directly register for other summer 1 classes that don't overlap with your study abroad. In those cases, the best thing to do is to reach out to your academic advisor and chat with them about requesting an overload, especially if your summer 1 classes are not overlapping with study abroad. If you run into any challenges with that, reach out to your advisor. We can help support on our side as well. But as long as your summer 1 or Maymester classes don't overlap with your study abroad program, you should be able to get an overload so you can take classes on campus during that summer 1 time period. So we're working on summer registration now for study abroad. Most students have been registered with the exception of a few that might need an overload, which we're working with advising on, or maybe still have a hold on an account or things like that. And if that's the case, you would have hopefully received an email from us at this point. And then like I mentioned with billing, all of the billing should happen with summer 1. So you should see that go out sometime in the next couple of weeks around mid-April, and it would be due in early May, just like summer 1 billing at UNC. It'll follow that same timeline. In terms of health insurance, so all of you will be registered for international health and accident insurance while you're on your program. For most students in most programs, that's going to be GeoBlue. So that's something that UNC will set up for you, will register for you on your behalf, and you will receive a card from GeoBlue that outlines your coverage information. For some of you going on third-party or partner provider programs, your coverage will actually come through your partner provider. So that's students going on IES programs, Arcadia programs. I believe SFS and SIT are also not covered through GeoBlue, but rather through your third party. But regardless, the coverage is comparable. So if you have GeoBlue, if you have an insurance through your provider, you would have the more or less the same coverage. It's just where that coverage information will be coming from. In terms of GeoBlue, there are apps that help you find English-speaking doctors in your location, helps you find places you can get prescriptions filled, or maybe different names for prescriptions than what you're familiar with here in the US. Any sort of COVID-19 alerts that might pop up will come to you through the app. Typically, your insurance card is mailed or emailed to you a few days or a week or so before your program starts. It usually is titled Welcome to GeoBlue, and sometimes does go to student spam email. So I encourage you to keep an eye on your spam, look out for that coming in. If you are traveling before or after your program, you can add on before and after GeoBlue coverage. There's details about this in the Heals Abroad handbook, but that's actually something that you would purchase directly through GeoBlue. And so you can find the details. There's a PDF that walks you through that process in the Heals Abroad handbook. And it's very inexpensive, so it's only $1.50 a day. So if you are doing that extra independent travel, we do encourage you to register for that so you'll have coverage the whole time that you're abroad. One thing to keep in mind about GeoBlue is that it is only for international coverage. So if you are not going to have domestic coverage while you're abroad, we do encourage you to try and maintain some kind of domestic coverage, whether that's through your parents, through UNC. We just want to make sure if you do have to return home for some reason that you still have coverage here in the States, because GeoBlue will not cover you here domestically. And just to speak a little bit about coverage with COVID-19, COVID-19 care is covered under GeoBlue. Evacuation is not covered. But any sort of COVID-19 care that you might experience while you're abroad, any testing other than asymptomatic testing is covered. And depending on where you're headed, your location may also have a national health service that has additional testing or other coverages that you'll be able to access. So switching gears a little bit and talking a little bit about money. This is something that you will likely also receive information about in your specific program, regional, faculty, partner provider session. But these are just some general tips for thinking about how you might use money and access money while you're abroad. We do encourage all students to create a budget and to stick to that budget, especially when you are abroad and trying to do lots of different extra travel or extra activities. Money can go by really quickly. So really thinking about what is important to you, what do you want to make sure that you achieve while you're abroad, and trying to create a budget for what that looks like so that you don't come home and think, oh my gosh, how did I spend $10,000 in 3 weeks? Really thinking about what is reasonable for you, what do you want to do, and trying to create a budget and stick to that. We do encourage you to think about maybe carrying some currency and coins with you. Of course, this will vary location to location. There are some locations that are pretty much only card driven now. So, making sure that you have access to a credit, debit card while you're abroad. But having some level of cash can really help you, especially in locations where there's minimums to use a card, or, just being able to maybe buy off of vendors that don't have card access, that kind of thing. And you can order cash in advance before you head abroad, usually through your bank. AAA allows you to order cash in advance. So there's a few different places you could access that, as well as from vendors in the airport, although those do tend to be a little bit more in terms of expense on the exchange rate side. So we do encourage you to think about it in advance if you are thinking about taking cash with you. Some other apps that we have had students recommend from the past are things like, of course, Venmo. I'm sure you're all familiar, PayPal, Mint, Splitwise, just to be able to share costs between you and other students. One thing that you'll find is that customs with money are a little different in some countries. So in many European countries, if you go to a restaurant with a group of friends, they won't allow you to split the bill. So someone will have to pay for the bill, and then you have to work out later how to split that up amongst yourselves as a group. So apps like Splitwise can help, Venmo being able to charge your friends and make sure that you're able to collect that when you are in those group situations. Other customs that you might encounter, some restaurants might charge a different amount for eating in versus taking away. So making sure you know what the cost is depending on if you're staying in the restaurant, leaving the restaurant. tipping. In some countries, tipping is not expected. In some countries, tipping is expected at a lower amount than here in the US. So just reading up and learning a little bit more about the cultures of the country that you'll be in. Also making sure that you notify your bank and any credit cards that you're traveling. Some banks have an online form that you can submit for this. Some of them actually don't even require you to submit it anymore, but it's just really important to make sure that your bank knows that you will be traveling. If you need a PIN number for your credit card so that you're able to use that while you're abroad, making sure you're aware of any foreign transaction fees. Those can really add up. So thinking about accessing a credit card that does not have foreign transaction fees is really important. We've had some students recommend things like Chase cards before. I think there are some bank cards that are specific for travel that don't have foreign transaction fees, but many of them have a 3% fee on top of what you're already paying. So that can really add up over time. So just being aware of that. Same thing with using a debit card to take out cash abroad. Many of them have ATM fees. So just making sure that you're aware of what that is and maybe taking out larger sums at a time so that you are not paying ATM fees over and over again. Okay, so switching to talk a little bit about packing. You've probably all heard a lot of these tips before, but we do really encourage you to think about packing light, especially for a summer program. You don't need to take your whole closet, although it might feel like it. I'm definitely one of the worst for taking 10 pairs of shoes for a long weekend trip, but just really thinking about what you think you will use while you're on your program. Looking at your airline baggage policies and baggage fees. So most airlines with international travel do include some sort of checked baggage fee, but there's typically weight limits. In most cases, it's 50 pounds. Also thinking about if you plan to do any traveling while you're abroad, many of the regional airlines have much smaller baggage restrictions. And so your checked bag might not be one that you can reuse for travel, or they might have much smaller weight limits than what you'd be used to coming over from the US. So just doing some research as you're making your travel plans to understand what you can take with you, what the weight limits are, and what the fees might be if you exceed that. Some things that we encourage you to take with you in your carry-on. Obviously, your acceptance letter to your program, any sort of entry-related documentation that you would need, whether that's visa information, health insurance information, just having a copy of anything that shows that you are legally able to enter the country and have the appropriate permissions, of course, your passport, any COVID-19 related documents. So this again will vary country to country. Some countries are requiring vaccine for entry, or they require vaccine to be able to enter without quarantine. So making sure that you have your vaccine confirmation available, any sort of COVID testing results that are required for country entry. And again, that varies location to location. Some might require testing 3 days in advance, some might require it 1 day in advance, some may not require testing if you're vaccinated. So just making sure that you're keeping up with that. We do strongly encourage keeping a change of clothes, especially if you have not traveled frequently. It does happen that your bag can get lost, and so you don't want to be arriving at your location and not able to change your clothes for 2 or 3 days. So having a change of clothes in your carry-on that you can access, even if your bag doesn't make it quite at the same time that you do. And then prescriptions and medicines, please do make sure those are in your carry-on, as those are things you will need. Again, if your bag goes missing on the checked side, you want to make sure that you have the medication that you need. One thing that we strongly encourage students to check into is to make sure that their medication is legal in the country that they're entering. And so there's a website here that is really helpful with that. Also making sure that your medication is in the original packaging with your name on it, your doctor's information, your prescribing information. Don't put medicine in a Ziploc bag and throw it in your carry-on. That will definitely raise some red flags as you're going through security. So just making sure that you have that documentation showing that it is your medication, it was prescribed to you, and then confirming the legality of it in the country that you're headed to. Some suggestions for your checked bag, again, just thinking about what you will actually use while you're abroad. You will probably be doing a lot of walking depending on where you're headed. So comfy shoes, comfy clothes, layers, thinking about weather if you're going somewhere where it rains frequently, maybe having a good rain jacket. Again, like I mentioned, if you are doing any traveling and you see yourself on regional airlines, maybe having a smaller bag that you can use for overnight or small trips. Thinking about what sort of clothing you might wear. You might find that students who are in your host country wear slightly different clothes to class, maybe not as much athletic wear, or they might dress up a little bit more for class. So what would you feel comfortable in going to class in your location? And then if you do have any extra activities as part of your program, are you doing an internship? Are you going on specific field trips? Will you need any specific clothing for those activities? Here's a few tips just thinking about your technology while you're abroad. Probably the most important thing that I want to make sure I stress here is making sure that you have access to your two-step verification while you're abroad. So making sure that you have an app for the Microsoft email for Duo so that you can get into Connect Carolina, and making sure that you have it set up where you don't necessarily need cell phone service to be able to use the app. So, using Wi-Fi to get the push notifications or things like that, in case when you do arrive, you don't immediately have cell service. So that's really important so you can still access your UNC email in case there's something important coming to you from your advisor through email, or just in case anything needs to be communicated to you. It is really important to have access to your UNC email while you're abroad and to check that regularly. So make sure that you are thinking ahead about how you're going to have access to those two-step verification items. Some other things, just thinking about technology, we don't recommend necessarily packing extra hair appliances like hair dryers, straighteners, curling irons, things like that. Most countries have a different plug outlet than we use here in the US. And so you will need an adapter and or a converter to be able to use any of your technology while you're abroad. But in particular, things like hair dryers, straighteners, they typically don't convert well from US-based power sources to abroad-based power sources. So taking them with you, plugging them in will likely result in them, we call it blowing up, but they just won't work anymore. They will essentially become useless to you. And then even when you bring them back to the States, they won't work anymore either. So, thinking about maybe you can go in on a hair dryer with a few different folks in your flat once you arrive abroad, or different ways that you can get those appliances that you might need without taking them over and running the risk of them blowing up and not being able to use them. Like I mentioned with the adapters and converters, any sort of technology or electronic device that you need to plug in will need at a minimum a converter. And so an adapter. An adapter basically adapts the plug for the US to fit into the wall of a plug abroad. Depending on the device, so things like laptop chargers, cell phone chargers, typically they convert the power automatically. So you only need the adapter to plug into the wall to actually fit into the plug itself. There are some things that don't convert power automatically. So in those cases, you need a converter as well. I would say by and large, most appliances now don't need a converter. Almost everything has its own converter built in, and so you just need the wall adapter to be able to plug it into the wall. But just check the tags on any of your technology appliances. If you look on your laptop charger, it has a little tag that tells you converts 140 volts to 240 volts, and typically that will work most places if you're traveling. Phone options, again, this is something I would recommend talking and asking questions about in your regional or program specific session, but a few just general thoughts about what that might look like while you're abroad. The first thing you can do is check with your provider here in the US. So most providers have some sort of international plan option. It can be expensive is the only challenge. For example, my phone with Verizon, my international plan option is to pay $10 a day for phone access. And so if you're going to be abroad for 4 weeks, $10 a day is not really a great deal. So, seeing what options you have through your provider here to continue using your plan and your phone abroad. Some other options that might be less expensive, more affordable, are to use a local SIM card on an unlocked phone that you bring with you. So basically the SIM card is one that you can put into your existing phone. It gives you a local number and it allows you to buy local data plans, local minutes. Typically SIM cards are either free or very inexpensive, so $2, $3, $5, something like that. And then you can get a local data or phone plan for $20, $30, $40 a month, so pretty inexpensive. If your phone is not unlocked, and so that's a question you would want to ask your phone provider, you probably won't be able to put a SIM card in it. And so in that case, you might just want to buy a prepaid phone on the ground, what we call a burner phone, basically just a cheapo cell phone that you can then add minutes and data to use while you're abroad. So again, that's pretty inexpensive, $30, $40 a month. And then of course you can take your current phone with you if you'd like and use it for Wi-Fi. A lot of places abroad, especially if you're traveling in Europe or Australia, New Zealand, many restaurants, coffee shops, things like that will have Wi-Fi that you can use to connect to while you're out and about. And then in terms of keeping in touch while you're abroad, WhatsApp is a great communication option that allows you to communicate with people all over the world through Wi-Fi. Of course, FaceTime if you use Apple products. Here are a few ideas down here at the bottom of some other apps and some other phone providers that are used in different places around the world. But going ahead and thinking about how you're going to communicate with family and friends back home, maybe setting some expectations around it. So I know when I studied abroad, my mom expected as soon as my feet touched ground in Australia, I was going to be giving her a call, and that is not reality. So, is letting your family, friends know that you'll let them know within a few hours of arrival, as soon as you're able to get Wi-Fi access, phone set up, whatever it might be, just to make sure that the expectations are there and they know when they'll hear from you. All right, and just to talk for a moment about passports and visas. So in general, all passports do need to be valid for at least 6 months beyond your planned departure date. So if you're coming back, say July 1st, your passport needs to be valid 6 months from beyond July 1st. So make sure that you're checking into that. And any concerns about your passport, if you're still waiting on your passport to be returned to you because you've done a renewal or you have applied for a new passport, please communicate that with your advisor. That's really important, so we know any students who don't have a passport in hand currently or are concerned about not having their passport in hand before they depart on their program. Depending on your program, you may also need a visa or a residence permit to study in your country. I will say in the summer, this is less common, especially, just depending on where you're going. Many countries have tourist visas that you can enter on or short-term visas. But this is something that your study abroad advisor, and again, in that regional programmatic partner provider session, they should be providing some additional guidance on this. In general, UNC Study Abroad, we're not trained or authorized to give specific visa information, but we can in general provide advice and guidance on the specific country. Again, reaching out to your advisor if you have any questions about that, and they'll do their best to at least point you in the right direction on what you might need to do or any resources they can provide. In terms of flights and making your travel plans, we do encourage you to wait to make any ticket purchases until you have at least an acceptance letter from your program and your arrival dates and your departure dates. I know it's summer, many of you are probably getting that information now, but just making sure that you do have that official acceptance in hand. If you're applying to a partner provider or an institution, for some of you, if you're going on a faculty-led program or something through UNC specifically, if you have the UNC acceptance, then you're good to go. But some of you might be applying to partner programs or partner institutions. And so if you did have a secondary application process, making sure that you get that official acceptance from your host before you make those plans. In terms of your flights, we do encourage you to fly directly as possible to your international destination. It's fine if you do have layovers as long as you aren't leaving the international terminal, but that is something to keep in mind if you're thinking, oh, I'm headed to London for the summer and I'll fly through Brussels and spend a day in Brussels. If you do leave the airport, you are going to be subject to any entry requirements of that country. So if those are your plans, making sure that you're aware of any COVID requirements to enter the country. Are you going to exit the airport and be subject to quarantine and then not be able to re-enter and access your flight the next day? So just really thinking through any layovers that you have that do involve departure from the airport. And then the last thing with flights, just looking to see what the refund policies and the flexibility policies are as you make plans, especially, with the last couple of years, a lot of airlines do have much more flexibility now. So, making sure that you're aware of what your ticket options are, looking at refundable options, change options, just in the event that something does change, you have that flexibility with your ticket. All right, and I've mentioned this a couple of times already, but just again, to talk about entry requirements and local regulations. So depending on where you're headed, there may be specific entry requirements, things like vaccination requirements, testing requirements. This is something that your advisor will likely talk to you about, but it does change very frequently. So it's something that you'll want to keep an eye on as well. You know, especially, for example, with the UK, over the sort of holidays and into January, they required testing and then they didn't. And then they required a specific type of testing and then they went back to not requiring testing. So it does change frequently, something to keep an eye on and just be aware of, especially as you get close to your departure date, in case there's something new that's added or a specific type of testing or things like that. Some good places to look for that information are State Department or embassy websites. Generally, they keep up to date with whatever the requirements for entry for that country are. And again, just keeping an eye on them as your departure date is closer, because of the constant changing nature of the requirements for different countries. All right, so now we're going to transition and talk a little bit about your experience while you're abroad. So talking a little bit about academics. So we do want to really highlight that this is a study abroad program. So, you know, the primary focus is on academics, but of course you're going to have a really great cultural, enriching, amazing experience on top of that. But it is really important that you recognize that you're there for the study aspect, that your classes or your internships or all the academic aspects that you're doing are really important. You do need to plan to attend all of your classes, excursions, activities, unless you are sick or something significant comes up. If you are sick, make sure that you're communicating that with your professors, any on-site staff. If you're living with a host family, that you share that with them, just so that everyone's aware of where you are and that you're safe and what the situation might be. We also encourage you, if you do plan to do any traveling, to let your host program staff on the ground, again, host families, program staff, know about that travel, just so that we're aware of where you might be. And if you aren't back, by the time that you're intending to be, we can kind of keep track of that. Again, not trying to track you or keep tabs on you, but making sure that you're safe and healthy wherever you are. In terms of the academic systems that you might encounter, so some of you will be studying on UNC faculty-led programs. So that would be UNC graded credit. You'll be with a UNC faculty member earning UNC credit. It'll show up on your transcript just like you took it at UNC. But for the vast majority of you, you might be earning transfer credit. And so that means you might be enrolling at a university abroad. You're going through a partner provider, earning different types of credit that comes back as transfer credit to UNC. And so in those cases, you might find that the grading scales are a little different, the credit conversions are a little different, and we do have details about that on our website on the academics abroad section. And you might also find that coursework is a little different. So you might find that your whole grade is one assignment, or maybe you have two whole assignments for your whole grade instead of having lots of small assignments that make up your final grade. So just thinking about that, looking over your syllabi when you get them. And then in terms of registration, we will be working, like I mentioned, on summer registration now. Most students are already registered with a handful of that we're still working on. And so the placeholders would be for any students who are earning transfer credit, the placeholders enroll you in the amount of credits we anticipate you will earn from your program. And then if you're in a UNC faculty-led program taking a graded credit class, we will also enroll you in your UNC class that you need to be enrolled in. So no action is needed for either of those. If you do need any kind of academic accommodation or any accommodation at all while you're studying abroad, you can email our Accessibility Abroad account. The main thing that we would need is your accommodation plan from ARS. So you can either email us and we can help connect you with ARS, or you can reach out to ARS directly, have them send over your accommodation plan, and then we will pass that on to your advisor, your program provider, your faculty member, and make sure that we can evaluate what your accommodations are and see what's able to be offered to you on the ground. Each program and each location is a little different, and each will try to do their best to offer you the same accommodations that you're used to at UNC, but just depending on the local laws, local requirements, it may look a little bit different. So that's something your advisor can help you navigate in conjunction with our accessibility accommodation email. And just to talk a little bit more about credit transfer, like I mentioned, for those of you on graded credit faculty-led programs, those courses will function just like they do at UNC. You'll take the class with the professor abroad. They will enter your grade information. It'll show up on your transcript. It does impact your GPA, but that should work very similarly to what you see at UNC. For those of you earning transfer credit, there are a few more steps to the process. So you all should have seen the link the item in your study abroad application called Link to Credit Portal and Next Steps for transferring credit. And so that details all of the steps that you'll need to be able to submit your classes for credit so that when your program is over, we receive your transcript, we are able to process that credit for you. We do encourage you to submit your credit transfer request at least 30 days before your program or within 30 days of your program start. And that's mainly just for your benefit so that you can have decisions back in a timely manner and know more about how your classes will transfer. We do have, hopefully you've all seen the list of pre-approved classes that we have. So many classes, especially for summer programs, do have pre-approved courses on that list. So that is part of the portal that you'll see as well. So you can select courses from that pre-approved list. You can also submit new courses to be evaluated. Generally, all of the classes that are new that are submitted are evaluated by academic departments. So I do want to make that clear. It's not our staff in most cases that are making decisions. It is academic departments that are reviewing your courses and issuing the decisions on them. So you'll see courses evaluated to be UNC equivalencies. Sometimes they're departmental electives, which is a class that might say Phil .. So that means that's a philosophy departmental elective. And so that means that course is a philosophy course. It just doesn't directly match to a course at UNC. Sometimes if there's no equivalent course or no departmental elective course, you'll see classes evaluated as either a general education or a general elective, which are generally denoted as GENR classes. And if you have any questions about the credit process at all, you can always reach out to our credit team at credit_abroad@unc.edu. A couple other things I'll just mention about credit. In order to receive a passing grade, you do need to earn a C or better in your courses abroad. That will be reflected on your UNC transcript as a pass, which is the SA grade, and it does not calculate in your GPA. If you do make less than a C abroad, so a C- or less, that does come back to UNC as a failed grade. So that shows up on your transcript as an SF or a study abroad failed grade, and that does impact your GPA. So if you do have any questions or concerns about that, just make sure that you're in touch with your advisor and making sure that you're aware of what is considered a C versus less than a C while you're abroad. I also just want to mention you cannot earn any credit for alcohol related courses while abroad. So if you decide to take wine tasting or anything along those lines, you're welcome to take it. We just can't award credit hours for it, and it can't count in your credit hours as part of your program. So if you're required to take 6 credits while you're abroad, you would need to take 6 credits in addition to that wine class or whatever alcohol-based class you might be taking. So yeah, those are just some important things to keep in mind as you think about your credit transfer. And again, please make sure that you read that material on your study abroad application, as it has all of this information and it has the link to your portal so you can begin selecting pre-approved classes and submitting new classes for evaluation. And I'm going to turn over to Kate.
All right, if you hear my dog barking in the background, I apologize. But yeah, we're gonna switch gears a little bit to talk some more about health and safety. So like Ashley has mentioned, definitely, important to keep up to date with what's going on in your host country. So just, being mindful of case levels, current future restrictions, and just any sort of guidelines from the CDC, the World Health Organization, other health authorities in the US and your country. And as far as kind of packing and prepping for, for your trip, we recommend, especially for your flight there and back, face masks, hand sanitizer, wipes. Ashley mentioned your acceptance letters, health insurance letters, and then depending on the country, having a negative test on you in case asked in the airport or by your program. Emergency budgeting, just setting some money aside for God forbid, some sort of emergency, COVID or otherwise, in case of having to return or quarantining while you're there. You know, some programs and countries require the vaccine, so just double checking on that to see if that applies to you. And even if it's not, just makes it easier while you're there. Okay, next, yeah, that's all for that one. So some more safety tips. You know, we highly recommend writing down addresses of your school and apartment, as well as some emergency phone numbers. So, you know, someone emergency contact back home, maybe someone in your program, just to have that, keeping that in your phone. Also, like maybe writing it down on a piece of paper if something were to happen to your phone, just kind of thinking that through in case of emergency. Being aware of surroundings. So if you have a backpack that you're carrying around, you know, zipping that up obviously, or having it in front of you. If you have one of those like cross the shoulder bags, I know I carry that everywhere. So just having that in front of you as well, just in your line of sight. And buddy system, going out with friends, people that you trust. And we already mentioned keeping an eye on COVID and, you know, just laws of your country. So if there's a curfew or just, you know, things going on, like, yeah, demonstrations, protests, just being aware of that and trying to avoid that as much as possible. All right, so yeah, so more of, yeah, familiarizing yourself with the cultural context of your host country, you know, in this case, more gender relations, and kind of being aware of what resources you have while you're there, and knowing that you have resources back at UNC as well. So while you're there, keep track of your friends, tell someone where you are, where you're going, and just being mindful if you are in a situation with someone that you don't know. So again, let people know where you are, and have other people tell you if they are going somewhere. If someone does disclose an incident like this to you, respond with support, ask what they need, and just practice active listening. And like we said, we strongly encourage anyone to reach out for support, either to someone that's physically there on your program, or to someone at UNC, the EOC, or the Gender Violence Service Coordinators are both great resources. So yeah, definitely keep those contacts in mind. Awesome. So some more contacts. So STEP is a really cool program. So kind of like alerts that you get of things that are going on campus. I know, like, I get notifications on my phone or email. So that's just what this is essentially, but for things going on in your country and city. And yeah, keeping in mind just advisories from State Department, CDC, UNC International Travel Clinic, and emergency contacts. I know when you get there, you'll get contacts of some people to contact if like housing emergencies or something were to happen while you're there. Local authorities, emergency numbers, they'll give you those as well. And then we also have, you know, resources here to the UNC police. And if you need to communicate directly with the study abroad office, this is the number to call as well, which that would also be on our website. Yeah. All right, a couple more slides. So living abroad. So just remember that you are still representing UNC no matter where in the world you are, where you're going. So just keep that in mind. Think of yourself as an ambassador. Familiarize yourself with any sort of public transit, cultural norms, language differences, if there are different slang terms or accents while you're there. Wherever you live, whether you're staying with a host family in an apartment, dorm, just be respectful of your surroundings, and yeah, being okay with differences. This is a part of the experience, so just trying to embrace all that's thrown at you in the different culture, and abiding by protocols. So your identity abroad, just be prepared that you might be perceived differently depending on where you are, or how you're supported at home. But just regardless of these differences, there's no need to hide how you choose to express yourself. Just do your research, kind of reflect on the different identities that you hold before going and how this might affect your experience. And then also just look into your program's identity-based resources. If you're at an institution, you can find different affinity groups to join or to get involved with. So that's definitely something to look into if that's what you're interested in. All right, this is just on our main website, just some resources available to help you explore different aspects of your identity and to put those kind of in a study abroad context. So that is the link right there. But again, that's just on our main website.
I'll just add in here too. So there's a lot of great links at the bottom, like Kate mentioned, that are specifically for different identities and identity-based resources. The global guide is also really great. So that provides resources before you go, while you're abroad, after you come back. It just addresses a lot of different possible concerns that you might have or questions that you might have. It also gives UNC context for different types of identity-based questions. This is something that we are really committed to making sure that students from diverse backgrounds, diverse identities have a great experience abroad and have the resources that they need to be able to support them while they're heading out.
Yeah, so just going off of that, we have a large alumni base of students that have already gone abroad that would love to talk to you about their experiences of while you're there, just preparing to go. So this is a really cool resource to also exploring different identity categories or fields of study, just based off of where you're going. And so we have our student panel tomorrow, which we highly encourage everyone to go to, where kind of similar to this, we'll be asking past students questions about their experiences. All right, almost done. We have culture shock, which I know everyone is probably familiar with, but it's likely that everyone will experience this to some extent, but just being mindful that there are highs and lows while you're abroad, no matter how long you're there. Studying abroad is very exciting. You're meeting new people and experiencing different things, but there are challenges. Like we said, this isn't a trip, you're studying abroad, so there's kind of a difference in that. But culture shock is very normal, and it's to be expected when you're getting out of your comfort zone and spending time in a new country, away from home, different routine, and you're kind of away from most of your support structure. So just go easy on yourself and allow yourself time to adjust, and kind of being mindful and reflecting on how you're doing. And if you need to reach out for help, we have those resources available. But just some tips: establishing a routine when you get there, talking to new people, using the buddy system. Journaling is a great form of mindfulness, and just kind of reflecting on how you're feeling. Self-care, so any form of self-care that you do here, definitely take that there. Drink in moderation, and access the UNC wellness coaching from abroad for some more tips while you're there. All right. So here we have another link to the summer 2022 orientation site, the password as well. So we definitely recommend taking a look at that. You should have gotten an email already about your program or region specific session, so that, like we said, will be an opportunity to ask more specific questions about your program or about the region that you're going to. The panel is tomorrow. Again, that should have been in the email that you received with a link to the Zoom session. I believe that's from 11 to 1, 11 to 12.
5:30 to 6:30.
Okay, never 5:30 to 6:30. I got that wrong. But yes, that is tomorrow. So like I said, it's a great opportunity to hear from other students. The Heals Abroad Handbook, which is going to be in your portal. And we had that before, the Study Abroad Peer Ambassadors, and checking out your host website and meeting with an advisor and following us on social media. So those are that's our handle for Instagram and Facebook. So definitely keeping up with different, we post stories of different events going on. You can follow students that are abroad right now, sharing their stories. So definitely a good way to keep in touch with us. And I think that is it. Yep. Cool. I know we have some questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll just turn off my screen sharing. And so I know we have some questions in the chat, which Kate and I can go through and tackle now. So we'll just start at the top, and then if you do have questions, you can feel free to pop them in the chat now, or once we kind of read through the ones that we've gotten, we'll also have some time if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question. But we'll just get started with some of the ones in the chat for right now. So the first one, do you have to be enrolled under UNC student insurance currently to be automatically enrolled in GeoBlue? The answer to that is no. So GeoBlue is actually separate from your UNC current policy. So whether you have Student Blue currently or you're under your parents' plan, that's totally fine. We will still enroll you with GeoBlue for your study abroad program. And having, parent insurance or the Student Blue on campus also does not mean that you don't need GeoBlue, because like I mentioned, GeoBlue is the international coverage while you're abroad, and then your Student Blue and typically your parent insurance will cover you here in the US, which we do encourage you to have both while you're abroad. If you have Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance, is there a different process of obtaining GeoBlue? So again, no, we will register you for it, and we will set everything up, and then you'll get an email, usually, like I said, within a week or a few days before you depart, that has your coverage information outlined. It looks like we've got a tip. The Discover student card does not have any foreign transaction fees, so thank you for that tip, Megan. Anybody who is thinking about maybe getting a credit card before they go, that could be a good one that doesn't charge extra fees. We've got a question about study tours. I'm not sure if that's in reference to a specific program. I don't know if Peyton is still on the call and wants to clarify that, or. Okay. With Peyton, if you do have that question, we can maybe circle back to that at the end. It looks like we've got another tip. Sometimes phones might be carrier unlocked, but not location unlocked. In my experience, just something to keep in mind. So yeah, another good tip, just looking into your cell phone options with what you have currently and what you might be able to do while you're abroad. Another great tip for Meredith, if you have a layover, please make sure that you have at least a few hours between flights in case of delays. Absolutely, making sure that, regardless of if it's a domestic connection or international connection, you want to make sure you've got time to get between gates or change terminals if you need to. And then, like Meredith said, if there were a delay, to have a little bit of buffer time so that you don't miss your next flight. Next question, can we get connected with a flight buddy in our same program, or is it more likely that we'd have to go through the flights by ourselves? It is possible depending on your program. I would reach out to your study abroad advisor and ask if they are able to share that information or when they will share it. Depending on your program, you'll have a chance to connect with students, like I mentioned, potentially at your upcoming regional or program specific session. If you're going on a provider-based session, it's probably easier just to reach out to your advisor and they can help give you some guidance on that. Oh yeah, and same thing, will we learn the roster of those on our programs like partner providers? Again, reaching out to your advisor is probably the best step. You will get connected in with other students through API, but they might be able to help you out with that in advance. In the handbook, it says grades from credit transfers once at UNC were generally considered pass-fail. Is that still true? So the way that the grades are handled, you do have to take your courses abroad for a grade and earn a C or better. But when they come back to UNC, they either come in as study abroad passing grades or study abroad failing grades. So the C or better would be the passing grades, C minus or less would be the failing grades, like I mentioned. Can we contact our housing staff abroad? Where do we find that info? Again, I think that's going to be dependent on your specific program and what housing you have. So I would ask that question of your study abroad advisor. They can probably point you in a direction for that. If our program hasn't released a complete itinerary yet, is it all right that we leave that section blank for now on our portal? Yes, that's a great question. For the travel plan section of your study abroad portal, there's no specific deadline on that. So we just ask that you enter that information before you depart for your program. So if you don't have your travel plans totally resolved or organized right now, that's totally fine. You can just come back to that right before you leave for your program. When should we expect registration for classes for our respective programs? So UNC registration is happening now, so that's the aspect that keeps you enrolled at UNC while you're abroad. In terms of your registration at your actual program, you should receive guidance from your program provider on that. So usually it happens a little bit in advance of your arrival, sometimes more in advance, just depending on the program. But that should be something that you will receive guidance from the program that you're attending, and then we will take care of the UNC side of the registration. I haven't received an email about a region-specific info session. Is there a complete list I can reference to find out when this is? It could be dependent on the type of program that you're on. You should have gotten some kind of email from your advisor today, Jessica. And if you want to send us like a private chat and let us know where your program is, we can take a look at that for you too. Okay, so I think that was all the questions in the chat. And I think we'll just open up the floor now if anybody does want to unmute themselves and ask any questions or pop anything else in the chat.
I have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Okay, so if for my situation, I already put in like the credit transfer request, and they said they'd give me credit for like Spanish 203, for example, at like the partner institution I'm taking it at. So when that shows up on my transcript, it will say like Spanish 203, and then it will say like pass or fail. It won't be like, because I specifically get Spanish 203, that doesn't mean it's going to show up as like a letter grade, right?
Right. So if you're on a transfer credit program, like, and it's through the credit portal and it's saying it's going to equate as Spanish 203, it'll show up on your transcript as Span 203. And then the grade will be an SA is the study abroad passing grade, or an SF would be abroad failing grade.
Okay, perfect. So it's only like if you're doing one through UNC that it shows up as an actual letter grade.
Right. So if it's a class that's taught by a UNC faculty member.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. It looks like we've got another few questions in the chat here. If it's been more than 2 days and the study abroad credit transfer office has not approved a new transfer request, does that mean UNC won't take the class? No. So, we do route all of our classes to departments to review. And so the timeline for that review does vary a little bit, just depending on the department. So sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to get a decision back. So we do ask just for your patience. It typically, all classes with the exception of alcohol-based classes will transfer back as something. So if you just want to make sure that your classes will transfer, you should feel very confident in that. Again, as long as you make the C or better, the class is not about alcohol. Just the decision process is we are trying to make sure that we give you the most appropriate credit. And so we're reaching out to departments to get that, which is sometimes what takes a little bit of time for those decisions to come in. If you're unable to attend the regional session on April 13th, which is in person, can we be sent a recording of the session afterwards since it's a mandatory requirement? I would say in most cases, yes. Again, that'd probably be a good question for your advisor to ask if they do have, the ability to record, or what the best way to get that information is. You said info about our regional meeting was sent in an email from our advisor today. Yes, most of those emails should have gone out at some point today. Again, it could be that your regional session is being hosted by the partner provider, which would be like an API, IES, SFS type thing. If it's a faculty-led program, there would be a specific meeting for that. There could be some other specific meetings depending on what type of program you're going on, but generally speaking, there should be some other session, whether it's hosted by UNC or by your program provider, happening at some point before you leave. And that looks like we've got, oh yeah, okay, perfect. Kate's already on it. Sorry about that.
You're good.
All right. And yes, that's correct. If your program is through API, then your meeting would be specifically through them. They should have a meeting with you to go through the program details. Yep.
Same with the IES too. I know I think I mentioned that in one of the emails that I sent out. They haven't chosen a date or time yet, just that they'll have a virtual session at some point.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. We really appreciate you joining, especially, you know, this is a very momentous day. Big things are happening. So we appreciate your time, your attention. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to your study abroad advisor. And we look forward to helping you in these last few weeks before you head abroad.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.